Welcome back to No Sleep Tonight. I really appreciate you being here and spending some time with me. If you're enjoying these true horror stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's the best way to support the channel, and make sure you never miss the next night of true horrors. Alright, let's get into tonight's stories. The Sleep Lab. I wasn't a subject. I wasn't even a real researcher. I was just a grad student, working nights in the university's sleep lab. Easy work, keep the machines running, take notes, make coffee if the lead asked for it. When they told me they were running a long-term study, I thought it would be boring. One volunteer, electrodes glued to his head, a sealed room with no windows. I figured most of the nights would be spent staring at rainwave lines while nothing happened. The first night was exactly that. The subject was a guy about my age. He seemed relaxed, even cheerful. He joked with us as they wired him up, said he couldn't believe he was getting paid to sleep. I sat in the control booth watching the monitors while he drifted off. His readings were steady. He looked peaceful. The second night was different. The rules had changed. This time, the subject wasn't allowed to sleep. They left the lights on. Every time his eyes closed for more than a few seconds, a piercing tone blasted through the room. At first, he laughed it off. He said he'd pulled all-nighters before. He paced the room, stretched, tried to keep it light. But by morning, the tremors started. His hands shook so badly, he dropped his fork trying to eat breakfast. I logged it. Tremors, reduced coordination, fatigue. By the third night, they changed tactics again. No tones this time. Instead, they piped in white noise, constant grating static. He pressed his palms against his ears, but there was no escape. He paced the room faster, muttering to himself. Several times he looked straight into the camera and begged for it to stop, just for a few minutes of silence. I turned to the lead. He can't take this. We should stop. The lead didn't even glance at me. He just said, flat and calm, just record everything. So I sat there, writing while the man begged. By dawn, he wasn't pacing anymore. He sat on the floor with his knees pulled to his chest, silent tears cutting tracks down his face. The fourth night broke him. He stopped eating, stopped drinking. He spoke constantly now, but not to us, to something else. He sat in the corner, whispering, nodding, laughing at empty air. At one point, he pulled the blanket from the cot and covered the camera. The lid pressed a switch that yanked it away. That's when we saw him, standing in the far corner, forehead against the wall, whispering words we couldn't hear. His vitals spiked, heart racing dangerously high. Sweat poured down his face. His nails were cracked and bleeding from scratching the walls. I turned to the lead again, desperate. We have to intervene. He's not going to make it. The lead didn't move. He just repeated the same words. Do not interfere. Record everything. I looked back through the glass. The subject turned then, slowly, and stared straight into the camera. His lips were split, his face pale, but his eyes locked on mine. And he whispered one word, help. I froze. My chest tightened. My pen slipped from my hand, but I didn't move. Hours dragged by. His body finally gave out. He tore the electrodes from his skin, collapsed onto the floor, and began to twitch. The alarms on the monitors screamed. I stood, ready to go in, but the lead stepped in front of the door and blocked it with his body. His face was expressionless. We just stood there, listening to the monitors, until the line on the heart screen went flat. The room went still. The next morning, my notes were gone. replaced by a single sentence in the file. Subject removed from study due to non-compliance. That was it. That's all they recorded. But I remember everything. The pacing, the begging, the whispering to the corners, the blood under his nails. And I remember the way he looked at me through the camera that last night. Like he knew I was there, watching, and how powerless I was to stop any of it. That face hasn't left me, and it never will. The military test. I wasn't a soldier. I was just a civilian contractor. The kind they bring in when they need a clean-up job done cheap and quiet. The paperwork said I was helping to clear out a decommissioned facility. Nothing sensitive, nothing dangerous. Just catalog what was left and lock it up for good. Most of the crew stuck to the upper levels. That part was easy. Offices with broken desks, phones ripped from walls, papers scattered across the floor, tossed everywhere. The kind of place you could almost mistake for a school or an old factory. But I was the youngest, the one who didn't complain. So, they sent me lower. The elevator rattled as it dropped. The smell changed as soon as the doors opened. Upstairs, it had been dust and paper. Down here, it was different, damp, metallic, sharp in the back of the throat. The corridor stretched long and grey, lined with thick steel doors. Some had wheel locks, others heavy bolts. Across the walls, faded paint stencils read, "Authorized personnel only. No entry without respirator." It didn't look abandoned. It looked sealed. I took a few steps, flashlight beam jumping on the concrete. My boots echoed too loud. The sound didn't fade naturally. It carried, bouncing around until I wasn't sure if it was still me making it. The first room I opened stopped me cold. The walls were scorched black, as if fire had licked them in violent streaks. The floor was stained dark, white patches of something that had seeped deep into the concrete. And in the far corner were cages. Real cages, built to hold people. Thick bars bent outward, warped, as if something inside had pushed until the steel gave way. My stomach twisted. I shut the door and kept moving, telling myself not to look back. The next room was worse. Restraints bolted into the floor, chains anchored to the walls. A steel table stood in the center, with leather straps still fastened tight. Next to it was a stack of binders, swollen from water damage. The pages curled and yellowed. I knew I shouldn't, but I opened one. The first sheet looked routine. Age, height, weight, background, a subject profile. But at the bottom were notes. Subject refused food. Subject non-responsive to light cues. Subject attempted to remove restraints. Then one line underlined 3 times. Subject terminated. I flipped the page. Another subject, another endnote. My hands shook as I skimmed through. Dozens of forms, all the same ending. Terminated. I shoved the binder closed, bile rising in my throat. That's when I noticed the camera. Every room had one. Old boxy units mounted high in the corners. Dust coated their lenses, but each had a tiny red light glowing faintly. If the power was cut down here, why were the lights still on? I backed out, forcing the door closed behind me, and hurried down the corridor. One door caught my eye. Its frame was cracked, the metal bent outward like something had slammed against it, again and again from the inside. I didn't open it. I just kept walking, heartbeat thudding in my ears. At the far end was a blast door, bigger than the rest. A wheel lock sat in the center, stiff with rust. I gripped it with both hands and forced it to turn. Metal groaned. The door cracked open, just enough for me to peer inside. The smell hit me first. Sour, metallic. The walls were covered in scratches, not neat marks. not tools. Long, jagged gouges, uneven and desperate. I shut the door fast and spun the wheel until it clanged shut. My palms were slick with sweat. When I finally made it back upstairs, I went straight to my supervisor. I told him what I'd seen. The cages, the restraints, the binders, the cameras still glowing. He didn't look surprised, didn't even look at me. He just smirked and said, "Those levels haven't been active since the 80s. You're spooking yourself. Write your notes and move on." I pressed him about the cameras. Told him I saw the red lights. He laughed. "None of that equipment works." Forget it, but I can't forget. Because I know what I saw. I saw cameras, still glowing red, aimed at every room like someone might still be watching. The official story says those levels were shut down in the 80s, but standing there in that corridor, I didn't feel like I was walking through history. I felt like I was standing in the middle of something that had never really ended. The sensory deprivation tank. I wasn't a subject. I wasn't even a real researcher. I was just a grad assistant in the psychology lab, stuck with late-night observation shifts. Most nights were boring. I logged data, checked equipment, and watched people get paid to nap. Then they launched a study they called sensory deprivation trials. The setup was simple on paper. Put a subject in a flotation tank, warm salt water, sealed chamber, total darkness and silence, and measure how long their mind could handle it. It sounded harmless. People paid for this at spas. But this wasn't about relaxation. It was about pushing limits. The subject was a woman in her late 20s. She signed the forms, gave a nervous smile, and slipped her waterproof wrist monitor on before climbing into the tank. The device would track her vitals. That was all we'd have once the lid shut. I stood in the observation booth with the lead researcher, eyes fixed on the screen. The lid closed with a metallic click. She was inside. At first, everything was normal, her heart rate steady, breathing calm. Through the intercom, she said the water was warm, comfortable, like floating in space. An hour passed, nothing unusual. The lead scribbled a note. By the second hour, she pressed the intercom. Her voice was soft, uneasy. "It's so loud in here." The lead asked, "Loud how?" She whispered. Voices, like murmurs, far away. The lead shut the intercom off. "Hallucinations," he muttered. "Expected." We kept recording. By the third hour, her vitals climbed, heart rate spiking, breath quick and shallow. She whispered constantly now, words too faint for the mic to catch. Sometimes she giggled. Other times she gasped, sharp and sudden, like something startled her in the dark. I shifted uncomfortably. Should we stop? The lead didn't look up from his clipboard. "She's fine." "Record it." By the fourth hour, panic set in. She began pounding on the lid, slow and steady. Her voice cracked through the mic. "Let me out. Please let me out. There's something in here with me." I reached for the release switch, but the lead's voice cut me off. Calm. Cold. Not yet. Her fists thudded against the metal. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. "It's touching me," she sobbed. "It's in the water." The monitor screamed with spikes, heart rate racing dangerously high. And then, silence. The pounding stopped. The breathing leveled out. Her vitals steadied. The lead leaned back, satisfied. She's adapting. But the quiet stretched too long. I leaned toward the mic. "Hello? Can you hear me?" No answer. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still nothing. Finally, the lead nodded. "Open it." I hit the switch. The lid groaned as it lifted, steam rolling out. She floated perfectly still, face up, eyes wide open. "Mom," I called. No blink, no movement. The lead motioned to me. Together, we lifted her out and laid her on the cot beside the tank. Her skin was warm, muscles slack, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, unbroken. My hands trembled as I clipped the portable scanner over her wrist monitor to double-check. The numbers came back steady. Strong pulse, normal breathing. She was alive, but she didn't speak, didn't move. I bent close, whispering, "Can you hear me?" Her lips twitched, just enough to form words. They told me not to come out. The chill that went through me was worse than anything I'd felt in that room. The lead scribbled one final note and said flatly, "Log it as subject withdrawn." That was it. But I can still see her face. Wide, unblinking eyes. Not looking at me, looking past me. And I can still hear her voice. Barely a whisper. They told me not to come out. Well, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching No Sleep Tonight. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, sleep well.